First question.
Thanks. So this question is directed primarily to Jeff, but I'd like to hear all the panelists weigh in if you're willing. I kind of understand the post-persuasion argument. However, people are eventually persuaded one way or the other, maybe if not always by rational, logical arguments, such as the kind that motivate the people in this room, something that tugs on their heartstrings, something emotional. And I'm just wondering, where do you see the opportunities for spreading libertarian notions and anarchism? What are the limits of the persuasion and what are the best techniques?
Well, I think it's happening organically. I think like-minded people are going to need to have some sort of geographic concentration, whether that's in Europe or in America. I don't know any other way to do it. The United States is not going to stay together. Too much centrifugal force, just mechanically. And so when entitlements and the dollar and the infrastructure start to fail, I think people will naturally look to coalesce around like-minded people. I think right now we're just too comfortable to have that happen.
German custom. After this very lengthy lecture, I needed a beer, so.
Okay, I have a question for Rahim about Bitcoin. I was interested in Bitcoin, like a lot of people, and I happen to know quite well a professor of statistics who is specialized in volatility. You did mention the Sharpe ratio, which has a volatility in the denominator. And for everybody, if you think of a bell curve, then the volatility is more or less the width of the bell curve. Okay? So I asked him to measure the volatility of Bitcoin, and he told me that it is infinite.
It is what?
Volatility is infinite. Infinite, yeah. So, which is statistically possible. There are plenty of distributions whose volatility is infinite. So how can we put that in a portfolio if the volatility is infinite?
Oh, yeah. Interesting professor of statistics. Yeah, okay, well, you need to get me in touch with him later on. Volatility is no problem to the upside. That's why I rather think the Sortino ratio is a better measure than the Sharpe ratio, because infinite upside volatility is great. That's wonderful. The problem are the corrections. And then, of course, it could be like the time frame considered too short. But I think for this kind of short time world we live in, the time it has been around is long enough compared to most investment options. But again, I was not recommending 100% allocation. I think we know it well enough, and if we look at volatility corrected performance and we don't worry about infinite volatility to the upside, still I think it holds that you can have something in the portfolio, even if some professor of statistics with some measure finds out it has infinite volatility.
My question is for Guido. Do you see any deleterious consequences of the socially deleterious consequences of the expansion, the huge expansion of universities? And if so, what are they?
Well, obviously, it's a huge waste of time, right? Because we were training people for. I mean, actually, there's this old joke, right? I mean, we are pretending to teach, and they're pretending to learn, right? And so we are spending time teaching people, very often people who are unable to be taught anything. Look, you know the problem. If more than half of an age cohort goes to the university, it means that you have some people coming to the university who have an IQ of less than 100. okay? It's impossible that such people be able to study at the university level. I mean, in the traditional meaning of the word. It's just, so there are only two solutions. Either you really dumb it down to make it meaningless, or you fail them. Now, what we do in France is a combination of both. Right? So far, we are allowed to fail most of them. And so everybody can take a chance and pick and so on, but then, I mean, in the better programs of which we are part, fortunately, so only the good kids get through to the second year, third year, and so on. But there are many schools who are doing the opposite because you are being paid, you're being subsidized by the state, depending on the number of students that you graduate and that you have in class. So there's a very perverse incentive to do this. So, I mean, all these people, it is nothing against low IQ, and I have nothing, it's just not what the university is supposed to do. And these people, they would be much happier doing something, and I know actually quite a few of them that are liked, and they did great careers in some manual things and so on, carpenting and housing and so on, and that's where they are very successful, and that's where they can earn decent money, much better than what they can earn after 5 years or 3 years of university teaching, and then they really haven't learned anything. And they still have to do the bakery shop and whatever else. So it's a huge waste of time. It's socially destructive also insofar as they don't form meaningful social relationships, because in the best of all cases they have a good time with their fellow students and so on. Sometimes they get drunk, they do the girl and boy thing and so on, but they don't form meaningful relationships. They don't project themselves to being fathers, mothers, and so on, which is actually would be satisfying to most of them. And they're just being distracted. So they come out of this, and they've lost 5 years, in the best of all cases, and they've wasted money of their family, money, taxpayer money, and so on, and we haven't advanced a single step, except that unemployment statistics have been a little lower than they would otherwise have been. So, and that's just the beginning. And I don't want to go on.
Just add a little bit. I've been teaching in all German-speaking countries, but I never got a full professorship. So I'm also graded by the students. And if I don't dumb it down enough, they fail me, and I lose the teaching position. So that's how it works at university, in Europe at least.
Yeah. So that's why you do the professor grading before the exams.
I have a question for Professor Hoppe. I got the impression from your talk that it would have been prudent or even logical that the United States would have entered the Second World War fighting Stalin, basically, or fighting both Hitler and Stalin. And if you count for, you want to stop these regimes killing their own people, or if you just see that they are both warmongers, or maybe out of self-interest. Is there a good explanation why they allied with the Soviet Union, except for maybe it was practical reasons? Or is it completely fringe thought to think, okay, the United States could have just attacked both and ended both regimes? Well, that's basically the question. If that's completely out of the question, that could have had happened.
No, I'm not quite sure if I understood the full question of yours, but many military experts at that time, let's say like General Fuller, for instance, a famous military historian, he thought the best thing that could have happened was the Nazis and the Russians fight it out, and the West stayed entirely out of this whole thing. That would have definitely saved Middle Europe and Eastern Europe from 40 years of communism. Yes, as you could say, maybe Hitler would have done all the bad things there the things worse than what Stalin did, but personally I have my doubt that he was as bad as Stalin in terms of wantonly killing people. So I think it was a mistake, mostly on Churchill's and Roosevelt's part, to engage in this war. And I mentioned General Patton. General Patton's view also was that the best thing is we enlist the Germans in order to beat the Russians, even though the Germans had already lost the war. So it's like, whatever is still left of the Germans, we should help. We should join forces with the Germans in order to beat the Soviet menace that was moving from the east further west and west and west. What?
Thank you. You answered my question. So this is just basically a strange decision making on Roosevelt and Churchill.
Yes, I mean, there's no question that some of these decisions are made without any public participation. The American public was not in favor of joining the war. There was a huge propaganda, especially the British were the best propagandists. I think they are to this day the best propagandists. The British persuaded the Americans to help them out in this war against Germany, which Britain had basically already lost. There are crazy leaders. I mean, look, we are ruled by nuts. And that is not just something that is of recent occurrence. It is, for a long time, the general population plays no role. It is a few leading types make these decisions regardless of what the general public thinks about it.
So my question is mainly for Christopher Hansen, but I think everyone in the panel could answer. So some weeks ago, I had a debate with Juan Ramón Rayo, which is a well-known Spanish economist who claims to be an Austrian, and he was defending Milei's monetary policy. So I had a debate over his monetary policy. And in that debate, he said that the central bank from Argentina has an important role stopping hyperinflation, because he's indebting itself with the private sector, so he's driving unwanted pesos out of the market, and so closing it will cause these pesos to flow to the market, and it would cause a hyperinflation. Of course, I thought it was ridiculous, and I responded to him that he didn't need the central bank to that policy was inflationary because he was creating pesos to pay the interest, and that is the fact that he wants to drive pesos out of the market is contradictory with him printing more pesos and expanding the money supply. And well, Rayo just didn't answer that. He shut up. And I want to know, like, how would you respond to this argument that Rayo made?
I think I understood that, yes. Well, I guess I would respond like I think you did, that it's in itself inflationary to create pesos to pay the interest on these loans. I mean, I can sort of understand that if you're a central banker in Argentina, you think this is a situation with no way out for you, because what you could do, what you maybe even should do, is just to say that, well, we're not going to pay this, and then of course you're going to have a major banking crisis, or very likely have a major banking crisis in Argentina. Such a banking crisis would then, that would in itself strengthen the peso, because you would then get rid of the whole fiduciary issue of money in Argentina, or most of it, very likely all of it. But of course, you would have bad consequences or loss of wealth for the people who invested in these banks. And that's why I think that's the basic reason they think they have to do this, because we don't see how we can rescue the banking system and contain inflation. And I guess I would just say that, well, we don't need to rescue the banking system.
Okay, thank you.
My question is also on Milei. Why do you think Milei is performing like this? Do you think he did not understand the Austin School of Economics well enough? Did he not maybe understand the main principle, what Thorsten presented earlier today? Or do you think that there were some external influences from the United States? He also is convicted to being a Jew now. What do you think is the reason?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't read his mind. I don't know his psychology. I'm pretty convinced that he doesn't understand Austrian economics. If he doesn't understand it, he doesn't let it show in any kind of way. And apart from that, I don't know. I mean, I think it's very mysterious that he pushes this Austrian rhetoric, and it doesn't really have any basis in what he does.
Okay, I have a question for Hans-Hermann Hoppe. You did mention Nuremberg was a bit of a kangaroo court, and a few years after, a French author, prominent author named Maurice Bardèche, wrote Nuremberg ou la Terre Promise, which is Nuremberg or the Promised Land. And he explained his thesis in his book, which is that it is a complete mistake to think that the denial of national sentiment will be confined to the losers of World War II. Even us, so he's French, so among the winners of World War II, we will also be denied the right to have nationalistic feelings. We'll not be able to say, sorry, I'm misquoting him a little bit, but I'm in the middle of this city. Our ancestors built it, and it belongs to us. So do you agree with this sentiment that the denial of nationalist ideas extends also to the winners?
What was the question? Did you understand it?
The rhetoric with which the punishment of the Nazis had been justified in favor of nationalism and so on, did this backfire to the winners themselves?
Dass auch ihnen ihr Nationalgefühl ausgetrieben wurde, sogar den Kriegsgewinnern.
Yeah, I'm not sure that is the case. If that drove nationalism out of the sentiment among the winners.
Maybe a different way would you say the winners have also been re-educated?
Yeah, but I don't know if they were re-educated in a way that represented some improvement over things before. I'm not quite sure how to assess this question. Is anybody here willing to do it?
No, I see the point. I fully agree. For example, in France, right? So there's actually the left jumped exactly on these justification of punishment for the National Socialists because it trapped the rest of the population in favor of the rhetoric, and therefore oriented the evolution of their own country. The famous case is the French communists, right, were the winners of World War II, and then of course by emphasizing the crimes of the National Socialists and the roots which according to them was in nationalism and similar things, well then could also use for communist-friendly policies to justify communist-friendly policies within France. So if nationalism ushered in the great crimes against humanity, the Holocaust and the war against the rest of the world, and then clearly France should not pursue any policies that could be construed as nationalist, and that's what the communists did in France. And today we see the fruits, right? So all of the left is infected with this, and in fact there's not much left of any really nationalist forces in France, patriotic forces. I mean, it still exists, but not. And in England, I think you see the same thing. Although I know the concrete mechanism less well. But it was probably also the Labour Party and so on.
I would just add that Frenchman looking around and saying, our ancestors built this city, it belongs to us, that's not permitted under liberalism. There is no us and them. That Frenchman didn't consent to being born a Frenchman, and the Northern African immigrant didn't consent to being born there, and so the Northern African has every bit as much right to enjoy the Champs-Élysées as the so-called Frenchman. Right? I mean, this is liberalism. There's no us and them, much less friend-enemy, and I think that's just baked in, and I don't accept that.
To follow up, a little bit of a follow-up to this question, which I find the answers fascinating. It's been clear to me for a couple of years now that mostly at the center of this evil memeplex of leftist ideas is this notion of equalism or egalitarianism. And that is a really destructive force. And it's used as a cudgel all the time to deny everybody else the right to express themselves, to privilege others, usually sometimes called, what's the name of the term is, resentful mutants or something like that, to privilege them over people who do merit to have a position, a job, to do something important. I was wondering if anyone in the panel has good or concrete ideas on how to eliminate, to root out this terrible idea and replace it again with the ideas that natural hierarchy and merit had functions that they had in society before that, so that our societies would run smoothly and correctly and fine again. Again, no one specific to the question, but if you want to have, you have an idea or an answer, I would be very, very happy to hear it.
Well, I think out of the Austrian psychoanalytical tradition, not only some of the worst excuses for that came, but also an understanding that one driving force behind egalitarianism could be a death drive, what then the radical left call like destroy, mach kaputt, was euch kaputt macht, destroy what is destroying you, a kind of destructive approach, and it's bred within a relatively wealthy population and modernized population that loses any meaningful context for themselves. And so in order to elevate themselves, they want to destroy. So egalitarianism is a death drive. It's like we are all equal when we're all dead. You also see that in this like footprint, ecological footprint, which is clearly suicidal ideology. And I think usually people take the deepest interest in psychoanalysis, of course, have psychoanalytical issues usually, or psychological issues. So I think as an explanation, if it gives you any help, yeah, it's risky to have children grow up in a wealthy modern environment where there's no clear orientation frame and they can get lost in this like anything mentality that Jeff I think mentioned, and this kind of anything where you don't see where the wealth comes from that you can consume and benefit from, that opens up this kind of death drives. That's why we see a lot of wealthy, really wealthy people. They have everything, but they are greedy and they want to have status as well, and they do all this virtue signaling and destructive virtue signaling. So probably look at the kids where it may emerge.
One other approach is to emphasize diversity, which is many of the left do as well, because they've been confronted with the problem by promoting equality overly much. They are in fact promising some sort of a future that looks rather grim. Because most people don't want to be just clones that resemble perfectly everybody else. People like to be somewhat different, feel special, which they are, of course, as God's children, right? They are somewhat different from all others, and they're all equally well loved. And if we emphasize these things, that difference is good, this is a very powerful means of combating egalitarian philosophy, and that people can be happy in different stations of life. It's not because they don't live the model career imagined for them by some lefty technocrat that they cannot be happy in life. And of course, that holds true for all of us.
Thorsten, you finished with a very profound quote from Goethe about people being annoyed that the truth is so simple. So how do we tailor the message so that the truth is more palatable?
Yes. What is the question, Tim?
How can we make the truth more palatable so that people don't get annoyed when they receive it?
I see. Well, that's quite a challenge. It's a great question, an important question. I think there are various ways towards getting closer or discovering the truth. Look at Elon Musk. He openly steps forward and tells his Twitter community of 200 million people he's looking for the truth, and that is his mission in life. I think it's a necessary requirement to encourage people seeking the truth. And in my talk, I try to shed some light on the integrity of the social economic sciences as they have been developing in the last decades. And I think it's quite easy to understand what's going wrong. But in preparing my talk, I found that you find some literature about it. For instance, Professor Hans-Hermann Hoppe has written extensively about it. But in recent years, I think the discussion about these issues have died down. And I think we have to bring it back to discussion. And that's I think, a very important strategy. Truth orientation in science, you know. I mean, even the concept of truth is under assault in the social sciences. Hardly any prestigious economist dares to come up and tell his audience about true theories, or it's this relativism that has creeped into the system is, I think, a great enemy to encourage people to get to the truth. Talk about it, spread the gospel. Whenever you talk about it, record it, make a podcast, make it available to people. I think this is the way forward. I mean, as Ludwig von Mises said, at the end of the day, people are driven by ideas. And that is why, of course, we have such a toxic situation in our societies, because the left, as well as their enemies, try to, get into this battle over ideas. I think the left has been much more successful because it's supported by the state as we know it today. And I think, the issue has been addressed, and maybe today was a good starting point, to encourage people to start increasingly thinking and questioning the scientific method in the social sciences.
Just a little contradiction maybe, or I think one of the biggest misconceptions of liberalism, even the good one, was that most people cared about truth. And that's why we would have this kind of public debate about things, and then we'll see the light all and get there. I think truth as liberty is rather painful for most people. That's why they shy away from it. And I think ideas are important, as Mises rightly saw, but I think for a different reason. Ideas are important because most people don't care about ideas, and that's why the tiny minority who does has a lot of power.
Yeah, one simple step that everyone can do is to just give some of your time. Right? The search for truth starts with looking for something that is not you, but is somewhere else, right? And this is something that we have here in common, which is why this is such a wonderful company here, because we all give our time and for something that gives no monetary return to any of us. Hans doesn't grow rich. Neither do we, neither do you. So we're just interested in exchanging ideas because we're interested in the truth. And if you approach other people in any discussion of a political question, of a question of justice, of a scientific question, with the background, what's in there for me, that's a very bad way to start. Most likely there's nothing in there for you. But you need to appreciate the truth for itself. And the most powerful mechanism, of course, that drives us away from this is central banking. So here I'm back with Thorsten, right? Because central banking allows us to plaster over errors in the past. You go something wrong, well, I mean, get an extra credit, get an extra billion, and so on. Doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. Who cares if you have the printing press and you can have another billion? Who cares about justice if you can have another billion, you can pay people just to shut up? Who cares about beauty if you can create another billion and you buy the most ugly shit at horrendous prices on the so-called art market, right? So we need to get rid of central banking. Death to central banks.
All right, I think we'll do. We've got one more, and then we'll call it.
One more. Okay.
My question is for Christopher Hansen. You made a comparison between Carlos Menem, the conservative politician from the 90s, and Milei. I think you were arguing that in a certain relative sense, Menem might have been better than Milei. And I was wondering, do you think that Milei, it's better to understand Milei as just another conservative politician doing IMF policies, or that he might be even a step worse, especially thinking because people like Elon Musk have shown great interest in the lithium that exists in Argentina and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, I mean, yes. Well, I don't know if he's a step worse, but I just wanted to point out with the Menem comparison that Milei is for Argentina not that unusual. I think what's unusual about him is his rhetoric, that he talks about Austrian economics, or at least mentions the names and the ideas sometimes. But in terms of policies, if you look at the first 2-3 years of Menem and compare it with yet now the first 2 years of Milei, well, in some areas Menem was definitely more radical. He did abolish the old currency. He did have a very tight monetary policy in the early years, of course, and Milei hasn't achieved that. Maybe
supply grew faster under Milei than on any of his predecessors.
Well, I mean, okay. I was very happy for your talk, Christopher. I liked it very much. I think it's correct, right? So it's a mystery currently why Javier Milei loves the Austrian school so much, but I have no reason to believe that he's not honest, right? So I think he doesn't know it very well, but for some reason, which probably is very superficial, but he still loves it, and he sees the point, the finality, that really the Austrians have delivered a systematic explanation of why you really don't need any government. And he has, whatever his flaws, I mean, there are great virtues also on his side, I mean, which I find very admirable. His great enthusiasm for this, his ability to communicate with ordinary people, and what I find very admirable is his quest always to lead by example. Okay, there has been recently some talks about his corruption on the side with involvement of his sister and so on. I don't know whether this is true, but in the months leading up to the campaign, even the years leading up to the presidential campaign, and certainly at the beginning of the presidential campaign, he was always leading with a good personal example. So that's great. And we should not forget that, I mean, if you're confronted with problems of the sort that he's confronted with, reforming an entrenched statism, entrenched welfare state, I mean, that is very difficult. It's not sufficient that you know what your end state should be, so the end result. You also need to do things in the right order. It's incredibly difficult, right? So give the guy a break. I mean, I certainly think, well, we shouldn't praise him too much. He's not ripe for the Nobel Peace Prize or for the Mises Prize or whatever. That's my opinion. But, I mean, he's not a zero, right? So this guy has good intentions. Good intentions might not be sufficient, and is more than good intentions. There's also action on his side. His personal responsibility, and I like that.
Just a little thing, it may be a bit US influence, because I mean, he's certainly not the only one who interprets the Austrian school as something that superficial. No, I'm very grateful to the US traditions that really like the Austrian school and would have died out without the perception, but it changed it. It changed it from a deep intellectual tradition to a kind of ideological, political thing. And nowadays, most people in the US would say, oh, we love Hayek. They're usually neoconservatives. It's like, yeah, of course, markets are great. We don't like socialism because that's the Russians kind of thinking. So I think that has been the dominant perception of Austrian economics, that it's something superficial and you like markets and you're not an outright lefty. So he hasn't really appreciated that it's a deep intellectual tradition, because otherwise, of course, he wouldn't have read books. He would have tried to learn from Hans Hoppe, and then those remaining in the tradition, and then would have looked at the origins and the time frame. So, but I think he's not the only one to fall prey to that superficial understanding.
Yeah, but intentions are cheap. Actions is what counts. And I mean, we have found out quite a few things about that guy in the meantime that that makes the intentions appear rather irrelevant. Also, things that he's a serial plagiarizer, for instance. So, intentions is one thing. Actions is another thing. Why would you just have your entire administration filled with ex-central bankers if you want to shut down the central bank? That does not really look like, I even doubt his intentions at some point, that he's also a person who runs around constantly insulting other people, not just me. I mean, I don't care about that. I don't care what he says one bit. But that seems to be part of his character, insulting other people, insulting people that were close friends, advisors of his, and then punishing also the children of those people that he admired, and as soon as they criticized him a little bit, he not only insulted those people that he previously said, oh, he's the greatest Argentinian economist, but I will also fire your daughter immediately from a position that you have in the current administration. That doesn't tell me that he is a good person. So I slightly tend to disagree with my dear friend Guido there on this point. Okay. All right, but in any case, We are well over our time here, and I thank you all, and I thank all the panelists, and we'll see each other at the bar, and I think there's tonight also some karaoke singing, so you can already train a little bit before and make it more fun this way. Thank you all again.